Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Patio Pondering. We are continuing our discussion with influential people in the ag industry, and today I have Lexy Turpchinoff. She's a longtime friend of ours. She is currently an agricultural educator and FFA advisor at DeKalb High School in Waterloo, Indiana. And today we're just going to talk about Lexy, what made her, and what she enjoys about being an ag teacher. Lexy, can you kind of give us a 30,000-foot view about you and how you ended up at Waterloo?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on here. And I mean, it's a pleasure to just be on here and chit chat with you. Oh, goodness, how I got to where I'm at today. Goodness, that's going to be going all the way back. No, so, I mean, I grew up a little hobby farm. I mean, my grandpa's grandparents actually built where I lived. And so they were big into the ag industry. My grandpa and his siblings showed 4-H, and then my mom and her brother showed 4-H, and that's kind of where my little agricultural passion journey started. I did not go to a school that had ag. I mean, I feel like most teachers, most ag teachers nowadays, or well, from the beginning of agricultural education, they had an ag program, they had an advisor that inspired them to get to where they are today. I unfortunately did not have that opportunity. I mean, I like to consider myself the ag teacher of my high school because if anybody had any questions about a cow, hey, go talk to Lexy. But on the reverse side of teaching, I also come from a long line of teachers as well. So my mom was involved in the education world. My Oma, she was in the education industry for years and years and years. So I also have that kind of lineage, if you will, dating back. But yeah, I started showing 4-H, and that's really where I found like my passion for what I wanted to teach in. I mean, I showed just about anything that walked on 4 legs besides llamas and horses, and rabbits and sheep. But so cattle and goats and swine, I mean, those are what I showed, and that's kind of where I found my passion of, I think I want to do something with animals. Now, I didn't know that I wanted to be an ag teacher until like senior year of high school. I wanted to be actually an animal nutritionist for the longest time.
Well, you did have me to influence you, so...
Yes, that is very true. But I just thought that was so cool. Like, my dad would collect like the feed tags off of the bags and give them to me so I could look at them. And so, I mean, I almost went to the University of Findlay, Ohio to study that, and also we'll play golf. Golf is a huge part of my life as well, which is actually one of the reasons where I'm at today in a way. But, I mean, I'll get there. And I visited Findlay and I was like, maybe this isn't for me. And then I think it was one of my parents, maybe it was my mom, said something about, well, what about education? And I was like, oh, maybe. I was like, I don't really want to teach, like, English or math. Like, well, I don't know. And then a family friend of ours was like, oh, well, I heard there's this thing called agricultural education where you can actually teach about agriculture. And I was like, oh, well, that sounds pretty cool. I'll look into it. So I looked into it, and I was then between being a agriculture teacher and going into vet tech. So because of golf, I looked at 2 schools, Huntington University and Ancilla College, and both had great golf programs. I was interested in going to either one, and I mean, both coaches were like, hey, we want you on our team, and I always said, cool. Who's going to give me the most money? I was like, your girl's paying for college by herself. I think in my mind and my heart, I really wanted to go to Ancilla because I really, really loved the program there. But then I would have been in veterinary technician. And I think God really played like a part in there and was like, I know that's not what you're supposed to do. So I actually didn't end up getting my financial aid from that college until the summer before I was supposed to move in. So then I committed to Huntington, and I mean, here I am now. I mean, it's been a whirlwind, but then I decided I was going to be an ag teacher, and went through all 4 years of college.
You're fortunate enough you got to go to college 20 minutes from your parents' house?
Yeah, about a half
Maybe?
hour. Yeah.
Half hour. And now you're 45 minutes from their house up by Auburn?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, 45 minutes, so not too far at all.
So you went to Bishop Luers,
Yes, I did.
private Catholic school, south side of Fort Wayne. It's one of two in Fort Wayne. Fun fact for my listeners that don't live in Fort Wayne. You got Bishop Dwenger, Bishop Luers. And when did you start playing golf?
So I started playing golf around 7th, 8th grade. My dad quite literally came home with a set of clubs and said, "Hey, got these at a garage sale. If you get bored, you can go hit some golf balls in the field." And then I actually started to get more into it. There was a park not too far away from my house that did like a summer camp for golf.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn like the different skills and everything like that. So me and my cousin actually went there, and I mean, if you pass a skills test and a written test, you get a free half set of clubs. So I said, sign me up. Let's do this thing. So I went and did that, and I think my first competition was in 8th grade, and then joined the high school team, not thinking much of it. I actually got to play a few varsity matches as a freshman, which was crazy. You could never imagine that. I didn't think I was that good, but then the years went on, and I kept growing, kept getting better, and I had a coach change after my sophomore year of high school, and that coach was actually my swing coach at our home course, which I would not be where I'm at today without him, but he was talking to my dad, and he was like, "I think she has a great swing, all this stuff," and Dad pulls me aside and goes, "Hey, do you want to take this seriously, go to college for it?" And I was like, "Dad, I just finished my junior season. I don't know if I can even be good enough to go to college to play." And he was like, "Well, I'll tell you what. If you want to go to college, try to play golf. Give it a good try. I'll get you a new set of clubs for Christmas." And I was like, "Okay, sign me up. I would like a new
Yes, I
set
will.
of clubs." I was like, "I'll try my hardest." And from then on, it was practicing at the course. I think I practiced at least 3 times a week.
Oh, my.
Winter came in, and we set up a net and a little, like a tracker. It was kind of like a simulator. And I was there 2 to 3 times a week, working indoors, working on my swing and technique. And I mean, I lived, breathed, swung golf, and then summer came and it was golf and 4-H, and that's about what my life was. And I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to have my coach at the time there with me throughout the entire process. And he knew the coach that I ended up playing for at Huntington, and so I got to pick his ear about that. And that coach actually came out and watched me on my senior night, which fortunately that was my best 9 holes of the season that he got to see. So I mean, it just went from there, and I'm extremely blessed that I was able to do that and have that kind of opportunity to play at the collegiate level.
How many hours of your swing were videotaped just to perfect your swing?
Oh, I don't even know. I could go through my camera roll. I could show you about like a million different videos of me swinging.
Yeah.
But it's so tedious. I remember my very first golf coach was a buddy of my dad's who refereed hockey with him. And I'd get to the top of my swing. He'd pause. He'd make me pause. He'd just adjust my swing, my backswing, just like an inch. All right, do it again. Do it again. Pause at the top. He adjusted just a little bit. All right, do it again. I'm like, what the heck? Like, how in the world is this going to help me out? Which, thank goodness he did that, because I'm very aware of now when I'm at the top of my swing, I need to be at this point and not a different point. I mean, it's hours and hours of dedication. It's no describing it. Like, I know sports in general are hard. I think golf is just such a technique sport that you just have to get it right at the certain angle to make it hit a certain way. And I mean, I fell in love with the technique and the science of it. I think it's so neat.
Golf, and I think tennis also follows this in high school, you either come from a family that played it, so, I'll just play on the team, or you pick it up just as a whim. My sister played tennis at Northrop. We didn't play a set of tennis in our family, but she picked it up and enjoyed it. You're from the side where, hey, this is what I do, but high school helped you perfect who you were, right? From a golfer.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Okay. Yeah. High school is where I really found, high school is where I found a lot of my passions, right? Like agriculture, I mean, 4-H, I wouldn't be where I'm at today without it. I mean, I wouldn't even be an ag teacher without 4-H and golf. I mean, that taught me a lot of patience and dedication. So, I mean, I love it. And, I mean, the only person in my family I think that really plays golf was my dad. I mean, he's the one that really got me into it, and by golly, it's always my goal to beat him every time we go out together, and I love that he got better, but I also hate it because as I got better, he got better. And
oh no!
So now it's always a competition, which he's never been the one to just let me win. So I always have to work hard.
And of course, you have to hit from the same tees he does, don't you?
Oh yeah. Sometimes I'll try to be like, "Oh, Dad, I want to play from the red tees today," and he'll go, "All right, I'll play up there with you." He's like, you're not getting that advantage.
Yeah, no. Yeah, even legally, you're allowed to. He's not going to let you.
Oh, correct. Yes. A lot of times I'd play from, like in college, I'd play from the senior tees and the men's tees flip-flopped. Mm-hmm. In some courses, I was like, all right, I know which tees I'm playing on this hole and this hole. Like, Brookwood was our home course, so it was like, all right, this hole I'm playing from the greens, this hole I'm playing from the whites, this hole, And so he'd follow me every single, part of the way. I play from the greens, he plays from the greens. I play from the whites, he plays from the whites. So it's always been a healthy competition that we always have. It's just encouragement. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
As you and I have talked about, I'm a duffer. If I play 18 holes and I have 2 holes worth of good shots, I had a great day. Yeah. But that puts me in a position where I can appreciate so much more the challenge that you have to get the technique right, because I don't practice, obviously. So I go to the course and I swing and I think about doing this and this and this, and either it works or it doesn't. But the dedication that it took for you to do that time and time and time again, so that every time you come back, your club head is at the exact same spot above your ear or your head. At the time, when he was trying to adjust your swing, you were probably annoyed as heck. Like, I just want to hit the ball, right?
Yep.
But that little adjustment and that repetition of that adjustment made you a better golfer, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. Like, that would be one of the last things or first things that we do in those lessons. And the ball we wouldn't even touch a ball. Mm-hmm.
So then it's all just about technique. Yeah. The ball means nothing. It's just a technique.
Yep. Okay. So a lot of times the ball the ball wouldn't even be there. And it's just practice swinging. All right, so this is what it should feel like when you are coming down to the ball. I want you to do this kind of exaggerated motion of... So I used to hit my ball to the right terribly. My ball would hook to the right real bad. And I would get in these funks of, I feel like I'm doing everything right, but I don't understand why my ball is going far to the right. And the swing coach that I had, Coach Harris, he would tell me to do this exaggerated motion. I'm like, that just don't make any sense. Like, he was like, try to hit the ball with the toe of the club, which is the very, forward part of the club. And I'm like, well, then it's just gonna, that's such, whatever, I'll just do it.
That's gonna slice it even worse.
It's just going to be terrible. And I was like, I'll do it. Coach Harris says I need to do it, so I'm going to do it. Sure enough, I hit that sucker dead straight. And I'm like, how does that work?
What you're talking about with the technique and the ball not being the important part, those are lessons that you learned preparing for showing at the same time, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's weird how everything just kind of connects, right? In golf, you can't be perfect. Like, if you expect perfection on the course, then you're going to get very angry and frustrated.
There'll be clubs in the water.
Yeah. With my show animals, I didn't expect perfection, but I expected the same amount of hard work as I was putting into them. So something that I did, especially with cattle, with my dairy beef feeders, was, all right, this day we're going to work on the rope halter, and we're going to work on walking smoothly. All right, the next day we're going to work on setting up our feet. And I know my dad remembers this, I know my parents and my sister remember this, but I would stand out there and we'd stand in that position, that square set position, for 5-10 minutes at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And if they messed up or they got antsy, all right, we're going to go in a little circle, and we're going to set back up, and we're going to do the same thing. And so, I mean, very tedious work, just like with a golf swing. And then after that 5-10 minutes is up, all right, we're going to take a lap.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're going to go back to the same spot or a different spot and do the exact same thing. Now, especially in the summer, I did this in the shade because I also was, it was pretty hot out. I was like, no, I'm not doing this in the dead sun if it was in the middle of the day. And then I always, when I was little, I would reward my animals with a leaf from this tree that
There you go. Here,
and I was like, you did so good
offering
today. Here's this leaf as a treat. So, I mean, I did that with my goats as well. Obviously, I couldn't do that with my pigs because to set up a pig like you would a goat or a cow is probably near impossible. But yeah, so, I mean, hard work, dedication. I mean, you're not just out there for 1 hour out of the week to make sure these animals are good. I mean, same with golf. You can't just be out there for 1 hour of the day and expect to come out hitting amazing shots every single time. We'd get done with dinner and Dad would say, all right, let's go walk animals. Sometimes we would drag our feet. Of course, me and my sister would be like, oh, but we're so tired from the day. Too bad. Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go. You walk this one, I'll walk the other one, and then we'll switch. I mean, it was never just Dad doing all the work, Jordan, my sister, doing all the work. It was my mom doing all the work. It was definitely a family effort. All right, you walk your calf, I'll walk your steer for 20 minutes, and then we'll switch, and that's that. I mean, it's always been takes a village, right?
It takes a village, that's right.
To do anything.
Those lessons you took from learning how to swing the golf club correctly, working with your animals, are those deja vu moments that you have when you're setting up lesson plans in your classroom?
I wouldn't say deja vu, but it's definitely something I look back on and I'm like, man, I'm really thankful that I had these experiences to where I can build upon those things. So like golf and 4-H, really, I mean, training those animals, you got to be extremely patient. And I mean, I think I have a decent amount of patience. I thank God for giving me that gift. And patience is definitely something you need as you're going into the education field.
But does that understanding that whether you're working on your golf swing or setting up a steer, that it's a process and you're not going to do it all, does that help you work with your students as breaking things down into smaller steps so that they understand it and then seeing, hey, here we go. We showed our work and look where we got, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Even the kids that don't necessarily want to do the work, maybe they didn't want to be in my class and they got put in there, or maybe they just don't believe that they can do it. There's a kid that comes to mind right now that it was a very similar situation, and he didn't believe that he could do this lab, and we were tying knots, talking about restraint methods for animals and how that's more of a protective thing for not only the animal but also the handler. And so we were tying different knots, and he was like, I don't think I can do it. I was like, well, let's try one. And his friends around him like helped him out, and he did it, and he was like looking at this knot, and he was like, Miss T, look, I did it. And I was like, that's awesome, now do the next one. And I think we did 5 knots that day, and he did 3 out of the 5, which some people might be like, well, he didn't do all 5. But you don't understand how big of a leap it took that kid to get to that point. And I just remember going home that day, and I was like, wow, that just made my day. And then a few weeks later, we're looking at breeds of different livestock, and there is this like matching assignment on these slides, and they took the picture of a jersey and they matched it with the same slide that the jersey was on, and you know, same thing like that. And it was a lot of work. I gave him a few days to do it. And same thing, that same kid, he's like, I don't know how to do this. I was like, all right, well, let's look at it. I was like, we looked at all these breeds. I think the first one was a brown Swiss. I was like, which one's a brown Swiss? And he pointed to the jersey. I was like, okay, that's okay. I'm not mad at that because what I found is jerseys and brown Swiss get mixed up a lot. I was like, you're so close. Then he pointed to the brown Swiss. I was like, yeah, that's it. And he was like, it is? And I'm like, yes, that's the correct answer. Now you just copy and paste it into the slide. And he did all the dairy breeds, and I think he did all the beef breeds. Now, he didn't turn it in, but I was, like, watching over his shoulder, and I was like, they're baby steps that help this kid be a little bit more successful each time. And I told one of our assistant principals that, and he goes, he did that? I was like, yeah. And he was like, that's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, it just makes me feel so good that once you become patient with this kid who maybe doesn't want to do the work, maybe doesn't think he can, and then he does it, and just that light that sparks once you say, yeah, that's right. It's just, I don't know. It's just the best feeling.
Well, your experience working with a variety of species, as well as your experience with other 4-H'ers, has to be a benefit so that you can understand the young man you were just talking about, that he did 2 baby steps or 3, and that's great, where he's got the other ones that were done in the time it took that one child to do one.
Mm-hmm.
So does that experience allow you to shift gears with your students?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you gotta think every single person learns differently. Every single person, receives information, does work completely different than the next person. And, I mean, sometimes somebody will say something and I'll be reminded of a certain individual and I can be like, oh, here's their story. They're very similar to you. And this is where they are now, So it's just like different things like that just kind of like spark little things in my mind where it's like, you're not the only person that thinks this way. Or a lot of times, I've caught myself saying, I think the exact same way. I could see how you would think that. Mm-hmm. But let's rewind and let's break it down a little bit more.
Do you think not being exposed to agriculture education in your high school and middle school helps you better understand some of those non-ag students and how they learn?
Yeah, I think a little bit. Me not coming from an ag program poses a lot of challenges for me. There's a lot more I need to learn, but also I remember walking in and to I think it was my animal science class, I said, all right, who knows the difference between a cow and a heifer? And maybe like 1 or 2 kids raise their hand, and I'm like, all right, we're starting from the beginning, which is kind of cool because, I learned the differences of those through 4-H. The kids that I had in that class, not all of them showed 4-H, but this is their opportunity to learn what that is. So I think it's kind of cool that I'm able to give these students what I didn't have in high school. That's one of the reasons I went into being an ag teacher, was because I wanted to give those kids that opportunity to find their passion like I found mine through 4-H.
Mm-hmm. The thing that I think is ignored or misunderstood about ag, and this hit me when I was at Carroll this week. They had a ag appreciation breakfast, and I was sitting there in their workshop, and I looked around and going, there's a welder, and there's a vise, and there's a lawnmower they were working on, and there was a electrical switch where they were wiring a simple diagram. There's a lot of things that I learned on my own, either on our small farm or as I got out of school and farm on my own, that you're allowed to expose agricultural students to, and they don't have to be members of FFA, that are just normal life experiences that some of us just take for granted because we're exposed to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you see those experiences? Or?
Oh, yeah. I don't teach our shop classes. That is my co-advisor, Becca, and she's incredible. Like, my word, is she awesome. But I know from my perspective of teaching animal science, vet science, food science in the middle school, that, I mean, these are just lessons that they can take with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was at the middle school, it was around this time last year. Again, like, not a lot of my kids are from ag backgrounds. And I was teaching about, what was it? I can't even remember. I think it was horticulture or crop science. And this kid who had never taken an ag class in his life is just looking at me like, oh my gosh, this stuff that you're talking about is actually pretty cool. And I know I went to Beck and I was like, this kid right here, he needs to be in the ag program when he gets to high school. And fortunately enough, like, he's in principles of ag right now at the high school. And, you know, and I saw him in the hall and I was like, hey, are you taking ag next year? And he was like, I don't know. And I was like, you better. So, even if it's not necessarily like something they'll use later on in life, like, I know a lot of my kids in animal science, they won't necessarily need to know the definition of what a heifer is, right?
Yeah.
They can take what I've learned and maybe apply it to something later on in life. So, which is pretty cool because, I mean, agriculture affects literally everything you do.
It's one of those overlooked, unseen disciplines in our world.
Oh, yeah.
We all take it for granted, and obviously it's forefront for us because we're in ag. But you think about the people that you went to high school with and I went to high school with, they had no idea of the inner workings of ag and how many disciplines that are. And one of the things that I saw, we talk about STEM. Somebody from Purdue said we need to call it STEAM and ag into science, technology, engineering, ag, and what's the M?
Math.
Thank you. Ooh,
yeah.
See? But ag encompasses all those, so it's really neat that you can expose students to this.
Oh,
And outside of the traditional, I'm an FFA, I'm going to be a farmer.
Mm-hmm. Not every kid that goes into FFA goes into an ag field, but it sets them up for success later on in life. Another kid pops into mind. I mean, one of our seniors last year who is going to Purdue right now, and he's not in an ag major, but he's like, I couldn't imagine not being an FFA. And he's one that didn't come from an ag background, and he was a national winner, you know, and
cool.
And he is just the brightest kid, and he's like, I mean, it was a blessing to have him my first year just to learn. And it's crazy because, I mean, as a teacher, the students are supposed to learn from you, but once you step into that position, it's crazy how much you actually learn from your students. And I think that's really, really a blessing to learn alongside of them sometimes.
Do you think you're learning more for them for two reasons? One, you weren't part of an ag program, and two, you weren't part of FFA. So you're starting from ground zero to a certain degree?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, there are things in FFA where I was like, what is this? And one of my kids was like, oh, this is what it is. And I'm like, oh, sweet, perfect, thank you.
Duh.
You know?
Yeah.
And then also, like, in a classroom setting to where it's like, they ask a question and I'm like, you know what, I never thought about that. I never thought about thinking about it that way. Let's research this together and find an answer.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
So it's not just, I know everything, because sometimes, I'll admit it, sometimes one of the students might know something that I don't. And I think that's really cool to get different perspectives.
Oh, yeah. But you're smart enough to spin it in a way that doesn't make you look completely stupid.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think about agriculture, and this goes back to some of my graduate classes where I took biochemistry, and I wasn't great understanding the concepts. It was a lot of rote memorization and learning the Krebs cycle, and this goes here and here. But where I really understood it was when we took bionutrition, where you took this individual lesson from biochem and this individual lesson from biochem, and you put it all together and going, oh, that's how you digest the molecule of fat, and here it goes through here and here. I see that a lot in what you talk about with me in ag. You're not talking about the equation. You're not talking about the chemistry behind it. You're putting all of those things together in, oh, here's the concept and here's what came of it. Do you see that, or am I looking at it through rose-colored glasses?
No, yeah. It's crazy to see all the different interests of the different students in the different units. I especially see it in my middle school classes as we go through, and we just touch on like a whole bunch of different topics of ag. It's kind of fast paced, but I can even see it like in their work where their passions lie. And last semester we were talking about photosynthesis. I was like, we're talking about plant science, and I was like, how do plants make food? And they're like, we learned this in a different class. Photosynthesis? I was like, yeah.
Yeah, biology.
Like,
hello.
They're like, this class, we talked about it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, you can find different things in ag that you learn in an ag class and apply it to other classes. I know Becca was telling me a story that they were talking about, I think they're in their small engines unit and doing like the math to calculate different things. And she's like, all right, you guys understood this. You're doing exactly this in your math classes. It's the exact same thing, but it's crazy when you just switch it to maybe something that they're passionate in or interested in, how much they can retain it a lot more and understand it a lot more.
Well, you could talk about flow rate on a filter, but it's just math equations. That's all it is.
Yeah.
But when you put it in, yeah.
Yeah, when I talk about like the Pearson square and like balancing rations, they're like, oh, math. And I'm like, it's okay. You're going to be all right. And then they actually do, and they're like, oh, it's not that hard. It's like, yeah, just step by step.
Cool. So there's two other topics I want to talk about.
Okay.
The one that kind of floats to the mind first is DeKalb is a very successful FFA program, both statewide and nationally. Was that intimidating for you to walk in the door thinking that, man, there's some big shoes to fill here?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I was terrified. I remember going into my interview, and I remember I was straight up, I was like, listen, like, I don't have an FFA background, but this is kind of where my strengths are, and like, this is why I want to be here. And I remember when I got the job, I looked at my phone to make sure that maybe pinch myself a little bit. I was like, is this real life? Right? But honestly, the thing that really helped me adjust and feel a lot more comfortable was, one, our community. Amazing. I love them. Like, I know that if I need help with something, I could call somebody, and if they don't know the answer, they know somebody that does. And they would be more than willing to sit down and have a conversation with you. The teacher that I took over for, she's teaching at the middle school now, and she goes, if you need anything, let me know. And she's always just been a phone call away just to pick her brain. I think last week she came down to my room, and I just picked her brain about our upcoming contest that we're having with demonstrations. And I was like, I'm still new at this, and I just need to learn more. And she's amazing. And I'm just like, hey, can I pick your brain? And she goes, of course. And then one, our community, two, our students. I know that they knew coming in that I didn't have FFA, so it was kind of like, hey, what can I expect for this contest? You've done this before. What does it look like? And they go, oh, yeah, it's A, B, C, D, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, sweet, you know? And then there's so many different factors that help me adjust, but other ag teachers, not just in our district, but like across Indiana, I know I have a friend that lives in southern Indiana. I could send him a text and say, hey, I need help with this. And he goes, all right. Or Mike Shirey, he's somebody that I look up to, especially in the ag ed world. We come from very similar paths. I know I can message him anytime and say, hey, I have no clue what I'm doing here. Can you please help me? And he'd be more than willing to go get lunch and sit down and
Yeah.
talk me through what I need to do. And then also being in a 2-teacher program with Becca, I mean, we both started at DeKalb the same year, but she is in her 4th year of teaching. I'm in my 2nd. So learning is alongside of her, and she already has a lot of knowledge of what it takes to be a good advisor. I mean, hands down, I think she's a rock star. So to learn from her is also really incredible. And it's a lot. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the easiest job, but it is also one of the most rewarding jobs once you start learning and you start getting a foothold and a grasp on what needs to be done.
So not going to Purdue could be seen as an impediment by some people, right?
I guess it depends on who you ask.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, Purdue's our land grant, so I feel like most of our ag teachers have gone there.
Mm-hmm.
Huntington still, well, especially when I started, it was still very new. I mean, I was the only ag ed graduate of my class. So, I mean, it's still very new. They're still learning, but they're growing and they're doing so well. I mean, Becca and I actually went to Huntington together. So 2 Huntington grads teaching at the same schools. It's actually pretty cool. Yeah. And I know the university was like, oh, that's so neat. So I don't think it's a disadvantage by any means, but I think it also helps open the door for not only the Huntington program, but for us to help grow it as well. So we could talk to our colleagues that went to Purdue and say, what did you do that is different than what Huntington did? And then we could talk to Huntington and say, hey, we think it'd be really beneficial if you did XYZ. And they actually take that into consideration and try to make a fix, if you will, try to be better, which is really cool.
Yeah. Well, it's nice you have that relationship. But if you were at Purdue, you would have an automatic network because Ag Ed would have had a class of 50 a year, 40. I'm just pulling numbers out. And you were you were a cohort of 1 or 4 in the year. How have you worked to build that network of ag educators that you didn't go to school with?
Yeah, so that's a great question. In our district level, everybody's there for you. We always say Ag Ed is a big old family. Doesn't matter what school you went to. Doesn't matter where you grew up. We are one big family and we're here for you. And that's honestly something that has resonated with me since I started in freshman year of college. I went to different practicums and observations, and every teacher was like, you let me know if you need anything.
That's cool.
At any time. It's not even at the district level either. I could go to a different district that I know teachers at, or that they're teaching, and I can message them and say, hey, what do you think about this? And I mean, I can go to our winter workshop. So we have winter workshop where all the ag teachers of Indiana are welcome. And we go through different sessions and things like that. And you make friends there. And just about any single person you walk up to, if you said, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Do you have any advice? They'd say, pull up a chair, let's talk.
Oh, cool.
And I think that's just the coolest thing. I mean, you don't necessarily see that with your other programs like math or English, and maybe they are a little bit to some extent, but I could probably tell you all the ag teachers in our district, and I could say, all right, if I need help with this, I know I have this group of people I could fall back on.
Well, you could probably go to ChatGPT and say, I need a different way to talk about Macbeth. And get a list of 5 or 6 different ways to talk about how you can talk about toil. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
It doesn't appear that you would have that auto-built resource because ag is such a small, unique curriculum. So it's neat to hear. So this is learning for me because she's opening the door so I can look behind the velvet curtain of the Emerald City of Ag Education. So it's neat that you have that network that's built in, even though you didn't go to Purdue and have what appeared to me a built-in network. That's cool.
Yeah, and even at Huntington, I mean, I still had a built-in network, it just was a little smaller. So I had somebody a year above me, and we had a lot of the same classes together, and we became great friends, and he's an ag teacher now, and then Becca, and she graduated with another guy, and I mean, we all hung out together. Like, that was our group. Those were our people on campus, and then we also still had a lot of classes with other education majors or other ag majors that we could also pick their brains about looking from like outsider in or looking at industry in to help us along our way as well. So we still have that community. It just looks a little bit different.
Well, it's ag. Everything's just a little bit different.
Very true.
Yeah. So what was the biggest surprise when you walked in the classroom 2 years ago?
Oh, goodness. That's a good question. I'm not really sure.
I'm full of them. Hang around. You'll get more.
Oh, I know. I think my biggest surprise was how much FFA is incorporated into an ag teacher's world. I mean, I guess going in, I was like, I knew FFA was a part of this, but I also knew I was going to be teaching ag. So how did they correlate? You know, it's very much a 2 jobs in 1 type of deal, but I think that was probably my biggest surprise was how big of a beast, if you will, FFA actually is. And especially in the spring. Like right now we are in an extremely busy time of year with contest and banquet and I mean National FFA Week is this week. Woohoo! Celebrate National FFA Week, everybody. But all these different things that go into what makes a successful program. And I think that's something that was the biggest surprise, but also something that I learned the most from.
Okay. Well, you could view being an FFA advisor like a coach. It's
100%.
extracurricular. But the football coach isn't talking to all of his classes about plays or what's going to happen at the next football game. But your curriculum might incorporate, hey, we got the forestry contest in 2 weeks. We're going to go over this or parliamentary procedure is coming up. We're going to go over this in class, right?
Yeah.
So that almost makes you a super coach.
Yeah. Well, FFA is technically considered an intracurricular. So if we look at, there's this thing called the 3-circle model where it's classroom instruction, FFA, SAE. So like FFA is already incorporated into things that I might be teaching. So for example, we talk about different breeds of livestock and we'll get into meat science here eventually, and those all fall into one contest, livestock skillathon. We talk about evaluation of animals, livestock judging, dairy judging, poultry judging, horse judging. We talk about meat science, meat evaluation. So there's all these different contests that go with different contests that we compete in. So it's not just outside of school activities. It is very much inside as well. So it's technically considered an intracurricular instead of extracurricular.
I learned something new. Woohoo! The other thing that I talked about with Tara Dinas last week, it just hit me, is there's a lot of women in ag and a lot of women in ag education. Between you and Carol, there's 3 or 4 advisors that are women. Am I seeing it right that it's a female-dominated, particularly on the young side?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Feel like if we would have went back, 20 years, it would have been very much male-dominated. But women are also coming in, and they're kind of taking over a little bit. And there are a lot of male ag teachers out there still, but yeah, there's a lot of women coming into this industry and taking charge. I know when we went to our winter workshop, you look around and I'm like, wow, majority in here are women. And I think that's kind of cool to see that growth. I mean, women weren't technically allowed to be in FFA until 1969.
Wow. I thought it was earlier
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah. And then you look at it now and, I mean, there's women everywhere. I mean, you see them in ag mech, you see them in welding, you see them in vet science, animal science. Every single contest, there's always, I feel like you see at least one. I think that's really cool to see that growth.
Yeah, that is neat. Well, I think it's a sign of the times, and we'll have another podcast when we'll talk about the male, female, and other aspects. But that would be a can of worms we don't need to open up on this Sunday afternoon. We need to celebrate FFA week.
Yes, of course.
Well, we've covered a lot. You're going to be asked back. I'm seeing kind of a tag team episode we could have fun with. Every podcast ends with the same 5 questions. They're ag-centric, so I'm going to go through them. Have you heard them?
I don't think so.
Oh, this is going to be fun.
I think maybe you mentioned them one time when we were chit-chatting, but...
All right. Well, great. This is an awesome conversation. So the 5 questions, we're going to hit them with you. The first one is, what is one lesson that ag has taught you that you carry with you every day?
It definitely goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of patience and how every single person is different. I think that's something that I can carry with me till the day that I die, especially in the career that I'm in now. I guess you don't really necessarily think of agriculture and you immediately think of patience, but that's something that it definitely has taught me that I think is going to be just the best thing that I could have ever done.
Raising or growing anything is a testament to patience. You don't plant your seed and have your crop tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you could spend one afternoon with any ag figure from history, who would it be and why?
Oh, Temple Grandin. Easy.
You're the second person to say that.
Oh my gosh, I think she is such an inspiration. I think it'd be so cool to just sit there and listen to her talk and just pick her brain about the animal industry and everything. I think she is the neatest person ever. She actually talked at, I think it was the 4th general session at the National FFA convention this year, and unfortunately I wasn't able to go, but oh man, I would have loved to. That would have been so neat. That is somebody I would love to meet one day.
I've met her, and I listened to her in person twice. She came to Cattleman's Day when I was at K-State, and you knew her greatness. And this was 95, 96, 97, somewhere around there, so 30 years ago. But you didn't realize that you were in the presence of such a great mind at the time. And 30 years on, I'm sure the same, ooh, that's cool. She's got a brain. And if you also think about the challenges that she overcame with her autism and being where she is on the spectrum and how successful she's become, I mean, she's got 2 or 3 lifetimes worth of successes in her career. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great answer. What is one obscure or quirky thing about ag you think more people should know?
That's a good one. I don't know if this is obscure or quirky, but just like how much it's grown in the last 100 years, 20 years, and all like the technological like advances. I think that's really cool to dive into, and sometimes it is kind of cool, like maybe a little quirky at the same time to see how, I don't even know what the date was, but I was talking about this in my middle school class about how all these years ago we were getting 40 bushels an acre of corn. I said, does anybody know how many bushels of corn we're getting per acre now? And they look it up and they're like, oh my gosh, how are they doing this? And it's like all these different like advances that they're doing. I also would like to pick the brains of the people that like learn this stuff. Like, how did you figure out if you put these types of chemicals on the field that you're going to get this product? Or how did you figure out that I can genetically go in and modify this crop to do this certain thing? So I think that's something that everybody should sit down and learn and figure out.
What is your favorite ag tool, product, or innovation?
I guess on the educator standpoint, there are a lot of companies and like industries that are providing educator resources. So in ag, you don't have a set curriculum like you would in math. So a lot of times, like, these companies, they'll be like, hey, we have educator resources for you. I'm pretty sure it's maybe Sullivan Supply. They have, like, all these different worksheets and all these different things that you can do to look at what products do I need for my show animal? What are these different products that I need for XYZ? Which is really cool that a lot of these companies are doing it now. And I 100% appreciate that coming from an ag teacher standpoint of, well, you know, I want to teach this lesson, but I don't necessarily have an activity. I don't really know what to do with this. And I might be scrolling on Facebook one day and I see in one of my discussion things that I'm in for ag ed that somebody says, hey, this company's doing this kind of lesson plans for you guys. Like, you should check it out. And I go on the website. I'm like, heck yeah, this is exactly what I need.
Sweet. There's a week worth of lesson plans for my middle schoolers.
Yes. There's a online curriculum for middle school, and typically you'll have to pay like a subscription fee to get it and everything. Well, our Indiana Soybean Alliance actually paid for a subscription for each program in the state.
Oh, that is neat.
Yeah.
Huh.
So it's really cool. I can get on there and I could say, scroll through it and be like, oh, okay, let's use this for today. So just little things like that the industry is doing to help out individual ag programs is awesome.
Never would have thought of that.
Yeah.
My checkoff dollars going to good use. And then the last question is, what is one small act or change you think could make the biggest difference in agriculture's future?
Educating yourself. I mean, you think about it, a lot of times if we just get on social media, we're not going to necessarily see the nitty-gritty of everything. We're going to see the face value of things. And a lot of times, I feel like ag gets the short end of the stick sometimes when it comes to that. I think when you look at the dairy industry, and you look at these cows that we say, oh, that's a really nice cow, somebody else on the outside might say, well, I can see her ribs. That's not healthy. When in reality, if you have a cow that maybe is a little over-conditioned, she's probably not the healthiest. So in an ag lens, you could see that. But from an outsider looking in, if they don't know, I think that's where sometimes we get a little bit of a bad rep, if you will. So I think for anybody, just going out and educating yourself, and don't just take things at face value. Like, dig deep and learn about the topic before you speak on it.
Yeah, we need to be a little inquisitive across our entire population.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and I mean, a good example that comes to my mind was I was a senior in high school. I was in public speaking, and we had to do a how-to speech, and she goes, I want you to do something that nobody in this class would probably do. And I said, well, I got that. I'll teach everybody how to halter a cow. And I had this gigantic giraffe stuffed animal, and I brought in 3 different kinds of halters. And so I was like, any questions? And there was a whole bunch of questions. And one of them was like, doesn't that like choke the animal, talking about like the little strap underneath? And I'm like, no, it's actually very loose to where, like, if they chew, that strap's going to move up and down. It's going to loosen to where it needs to go, and it doesn't hurt the animal at all. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's not a torture device.
Look at that. It's just like walking your dog, but you're walking a, 1,500-pound steer.
Yeah, that is cool. That is a neat example.
Yeah.
Anybody in ag could have an example like that, but that educate yourself is a good one. And it's a topic that is a difficult one for us to talk about in ag, because we have so many people in our world that have made social media platforms and we have to educate the consumer. And I don't think you're talking about that, I have to teach you. It's more of a, hey, it'd be great for you to learn this. And if you want to, go out and learn it. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Sweet. Well, I've loved the time we spent together. And we didn't even scratch the surface on things that you and I talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I should just get the microphones. We put it on the kitchen counter, and when we chat, we could have 4 or 5 episodes, I'm sure.
Oh, we could. Definitely
And throw in
could.
Toby or somebody else. Get you and Teddy and Toby together, and we're in trouble.
Oh my goodness, that'd be 5 episodes.
Yeah, at least. Well, Lexy, thank you for taking time on this Sunday to talk with us. Your non-ag background turning into an ag educator is a great lesson for a lot of people. I think it's a great lesson that you plant yourself where you can. And it's also a lesson that just because you didn't come from a farm doesn't mean you're a part of ag. So I greatly appreciate your insight. I'm looking forward to learning more from you down the road. And from my audience, thank you for spending time with us again. This is yet another episode where we dove deep into learn something more about somebody and how they're impacting ag in 2025. So thank you, Lexy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.